After a 5-1 loss to the divisional opponents, the Vancouver Canucks, and a looming 4-game road trip, the Seattle Kraken hit the road early for some team building in the Windy City. Let's talk about this and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to the Monday edition of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you your favorite team every single day. I'm Erica L. Ayala, your host of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. All right, Seattle Kraken fans, the game against Vancouver didn't go the way we wanted. We're going to break that down just a little bit. But first, I got to talk about some roster moves. And that is that Chris Driedger headed back to the Coachella Valley Firebirds. He did not see any action. We did see Joey Daccord this week. Philip Grubauer out with just a little bit of a undisclosed injury because we don't really know what happened. If I had to guess, it's lower body. But Dave Hakstol was non-committal on Saturday during Saturday's practice as to how ready to go Philip Grubauer would be. The assumption right now is that he did travel to Chicago. We know that the Seattle Kraken hit the ice this morning, I guess, but there was no media availability, at least made available to those of us that did not make the trip to Chicago. So that's the roster move there. Chris Driedger back to the Coachella Valley Firebirds. Well, we also know regarding the Coachella Valley Firebirds and the Seattle Kraken is Andrew Podorowski back with the Seattle Kraken. Now, the last time Brandon Tanev was injured. Actually, I think he came up with the Eberle injury, but Brandon Tanev took a gnarly hit, was out of the game, did not return with what was disclosed as a lower body injury against Vancouver. He got rocked center ice, hit again. And if you remember last week, I talked about how Brandon and that turbo engine he has, that energy, I think was skewing in the right direction. So to see him get hurt, you saw him during the Vancouver game grimacing on the bench. That's a really tough blow for the Seattle Kraken and obviously for Brandon Tanev. So will we see Podorowski? Well, we don't know. We'll have to wait for morning skate tomorrow, and hopefully Dave Hakstol will give us a little bit of an indication of what's going down. What we also know is after this 5-1 loss, the Seattle Kraken had practice on Saturday. That was actually Philip Grubauer's birthday. The fans sang happy birthday. It was beautiful. But a 5-1 loss to the Vancouver Canucks, and just not really what we wanted to see from the Seattle Kraken. Yanni Gourde talked after that morning skate. I found that both Yanni and Dave Hakstol, unsurprisingly, were pretty short with their comments. We knew as media that they were going to hit the road that day, so media was going to be pretty short, sweet, and to the point. There also seemed to be a little bit of frustration, but don't take my word for it. Here's a clip of Yanni Gourde. He talks, you're going to hear him in this clip referring to the hit. He did get into a little bit of a skirmish. We know that a lot of people are calling for the Seattle Kraken to be more aggressive. Here's what Yanni Gourde had to say about the hit or about his little fight, and then also just about consistency for the Seattle Kraken.
What went into the fight last night, the timing, and where you felt it was time to drop the gloves?
It's hockey. No comment. It just happens. Big picture question, but do you think the pressures and expectations of last year and what you guys accomplished are kind of a help or a hindrance at this point?
I don't think so. I mean, we're focused on this group and what we can achieve this year. I think there's a much more that we can do this year. Like we're not to the level we should be at this point of the year. We're taking steps in the right direction, and then we take a step back once in a while. So we got to figure out a way to be more consistent throughout our game, but also from game to games.
Short, sweet, and to the point. That's hockey, is what he had to say about the fight. And then overall, just feeling like, as we've been discussing right here on Locked On Kraken, that this is an inconsistent Seattle Kraken team. Not like they were in season 1 because they were brand new and really just, I mean, if you want to call them a lunch pail team, we're talking like very basic peanut butter and jelly cold cut meats with some mayo and white bread type working team. We saw them elevate, maybe go to the leftovers for lunch last year, but this year we don't really know what we're going to get in the lunch pail. And that's a little bit of the problem. We need more meat. We need more potatoes. We need more piss and vinegar, as Ryan Donato would say. And we're just not getting it consistently. A lot of people said even the fight with Yanni, a little too little too late. Tanev had already exited the game. Bjorkstrand actually left the game high hit and no retaliation. I've said multiple times over, I think hockey fights are very, very stupid. That being said, I am all about retaliation, or not necessarily retaliation, what I would prefer to call standing up for your team. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. But Vancouver and the Seattle Kraken were about even when it came to official hits, 16 for the Seattle Kraken, 14 for Vancouver. The Seattle Kraken close, but actually were outdone at the faceoff dot, 50.9% in favor of Vancouver. Shots on goal, 27 for the Canucks, and they had 5 goals. And the Seattle Kraken, 24 shots on goal, just the lone goal, and that came from Ty Cartier. It was good to see him get on the board. Overall, just an uninspired performance here by the Seattle Kraken. 0 for 4. 4 times did we get an opportunity on the power play, and that's definitely something that we're going to want to see them improve. The PK was perfect. 0 for 2, though, for Vancouver. So definitely a lot of things that we want to talk about before Chicago, and obviously that the team wanted to talk about as well, because they went to Chicago for team building. We don't have any details on what that looked like. If I had to guess, if I were Dave Haxtell and I'm working through Tuckman's model, I do think you need to go back to basics. And that is, what kind of a team are we going to be? I think they're lacking in consistency. They're lacking in the intensity and they're lacking in being able to really play with an assertive game, but also, you only get 60 minutes. You have to really play a complete 60-minute game, and we know that has not been happening. There's no urgency at times for the Seattle Kraken, and that is going to hurt you in the National Hockey League. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about team building in Chicago coming up, what I think the team needs to work on. And yeah, I think they need to have practice. I personally would prefer practice over team building, but c'est la vie. And then I'll get you ready for this coming week for the Mavericks. They've made some roster moves as well, and maybe they'll be going through some team building themselves, as they don't have another game until next week. All that coming up on Locked On Kraken. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy. And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. Now, we're looking for some of that passion, drive, and patience for Kraken hockey. But when it comes to your ride or die, your vehicle, eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle. Roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, everything that you need to have power, speed, style, you can find it at eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with an eBay guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available for U.S. customers. So what's the right fit for the Seattle Kraken? Well, welcome back to Locked On Kraken, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. In case you didn't know, Locked On Sports Today is now a 24/7 YouTube streaming channel, the first 24/7 sports streaming channel on YouTube, right here as a part of the Locked On Network. You can find experts, of course, all around the Locked On Network, and our league shows or our national shows, including Locked On NHL. So make sure you go check that out. But for the Seattle Kraken, team building. Now, there's a part of me, I've walked you through Tuckman's model. We've had Allison Lucan talk about it. If you're an everydayer and an OGer in season 1, and if you heard our most recent conversation with Allison, she promised to come back and talk about it. But this is where we are as the Seattle Kraken, just not getting the results that we want. And not necessarily because of what the other teams are doing, but mostly because of what we're not able to do, which is to build consistency. So when you look at the Seattle Kraken and where they sit in the NHL right now, we talked about this before, wanting to be in a good place in the standings at least U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. In the Pacific Division, the Seattle Kraken sit in 4th place overall, just ahead of the Calgary Flames. We are 8-9-5, a .477 winning percentage. So we don't have a 500 record. Everyone above us has a 600 or better record. And the Flames and the Ducks are in, a game or two of us. So we've got a lot to do. A goal differential of -16. Vancouver doing the best right now with a +32. So they can definitely put the puck in the back of the net, although some very weird wins and losses throughout hockey right after our loss to Vancouver, but c'est la vie, what can you do? So what does this mean for the Seattle Kraken when it comes to the wild card? Well, when it comes to the wild card in the Western Conference, we are in position. St. Louis right ahead of us. They are 11-8-1 with a 5.75, and then the Kraken again with that 4.77. Now, here's who we got to watch out for: the Nashville Predators. The only reason they are not ahead of us, same with the Coyotes, is because we actually have more games in hand, which actually could benefit them. Both Nashville and Arizona have a positive, not by much, but a positive goal differential. And so these are teams that we're fighting. All right. So we're not just fighting in the Pacific Division, but we're fighting teams. Nashville, they're on a 5-game win streak. Arizona, they won their last game, and both of them have strong home records. 500 for Arizona, 4-4-0. Nashville, 7-4-0. The Seattle Kraken are 4-6-1 at Climate Pledge Arena. So if I'm Dave Haxtell, if I'm the rest of the coaching staff, and if you're not going to have practice, which I do think we need to do, then what are you talking about when it comes to team building? Well, I think it goes back to, what do we want our identity to be? A little bit ahead of that clip from Yanni Gourde that I played earlier in the first segment, he was asked right after the hit question that Yanni Gourde was asked, and you saw me play it in the first segment. He was asked about, is the expectation, given how the team finished last year, weighing on the team? Is it a positive or a negative? And he said, I don't think so. I'm assuming he meant, I don't think it's a negative thing. And he talked again about what this team this year needs to do, and that we need to focus on this year. I do think more so than last year, the Seattle Kraken are maybe skipping some steps. We were all in, bought into the system last year, and it feels like we've skipped some steps. So if you're asking me what I would do with the Seattle Kraken, I'd go back to basics. It's back to they want to be a good face-off team. They have to be a team that works by committee. They don't have any superstars that are going to take over a game for them. They have to be defensively sound. I thought, again, it was interesting that Allison pointed out some differences between when we have Philip Grubauer in net and when we have Joey Decord in net. I think, it was an interesting inference, being that Philip Grubauer likes to see the puck. If he sees the puck, he saves the puck. But maybe, he's not, or Joey Decord, I should say, is not as good in tight quarters. Yeah, I think that could be some of it. But either way, we need more discipline on the defensive side. I've been saying this since the puck dropped in the inaugural season, and it really has been an inconsistency. We look at our defenders and our defensemen who are stepping up into the offensive play. Vince Dunn is amazing at that. But who are our real shutdown defensemen? And more importantly, what are we doing as a team when it comes to back checking, when it comes to gap control, when it comes to just making sure that we cover the far post? Not as much of an issue as it was in the seasons prior, but these are lapses. You have to go back to basics. And that's what I would do if I were Dave Haxtell and the Seattle Kraken squad. So we know they hit the ice for practice today. We're not exactly sure what they did between Saturday's practice at Kraken Community Iceplex and today's practice on Monday, but hopefully they had a good dinner. Maybe they invited Ryan Donato, tried to recruit him back for that piss and vinegar. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I also would be here for it. They need to settle into their identity, not try to be too much too early. It is still relatively early in the season, but it's also too late it's getting dangerously close to too late in the season to reinvent yourself. And especially because I don't think they have to. They're very close. They just have to buy in. And it was something that Dave Haxtell said last year that really stuck with me. He said, I'm not doubting whether we have the skill to hit the next level. The question is, are we going to be the kind of team, and at this moment, that's going to step up and do what it takes to be the kind of team we need to be to meet success? That's the question that has to be asked. So, yeah, although I personally would like to see them practice a little bit more, because I do think having some camaraderie, consistency with the lines, knowing that Andrew Podorowski is coming up, all of these things matter. And I think you do get some of that in practice. It has to be muscle memory. And it just looks like not enough is muscle memory right now. But sure, I get it. Take the team off the ice. Maybe they're too in their heads. Maybe that's what Dave Haxtell feels is going on. But we didn't really get any media, so I can't tell you for sure. And unfortunately, I am not in Chicago. But let's talk coming up on the show. Let's talk a little bit about the Kansas City Mavericks on KC Mavericks Monday. I'll give you an update what they've done in their last 5 games. We've talked about that a little bit because they were just here in Tulsa, and then they're going to have some time away. And I think that Tad O'Had, the general manager and head coach, kind of gave us an indication of where they might want to be. And maybe this is a good time for them to have a little bit of a break, because what we're talking about with Seattle, I think we're seeing also with Kansas City. We'll check in with the Firebirds on Friday, but that's what's coming up this episode and this week on Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is brought to you by the Sleeper app. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Will, Vince Dunn be our leading goal scorer? What will it take for the Seattle Kraken to make it to the Western Conference Finals? Who's going to score a 50-piece for Seattle? Are the Kraken going to hoist the Stanley Cup at the end of the season? And you know what? These are all possibilities. And you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And here's what you need to know about Sleeper. You can play NFL, NBA, MLB, college football all on Sleeper. You just pick what players you would like to take it with and who you think are going to give you your best chance to 100x your monies. Entries can be made in under a minute, and all of the functionality, including chatting with other fans, can be found on the app. To win a 100x bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8, count it, 8 player stats. You heard me, Kraken fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. And don't forget that code LOCKED on NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Your host, Erica L. Ayala, here for another non-game day episode of Locked On Kraken. But don't worry, fans, tomorrow's a game day, and we will get to see Ryan Donato play. He will be suited up for Chicago, which still breaks my heart. But here's hoping that we see Ryan Donato, as someone said in our Locked On Kraken Insiders. We want to see Donnie Boy score, but Seattle Kraken get the win. If you're with me on that, say, oh yeah. I can't hear you, but you can type it in the comments. Anyway, I'm excited to see what Ryan Donato's been doing for Chicago. I'm gutted that he's not doing it with Seattle. So we'll see what happens. But we're going to talk about the odds and all you need to know about tomorrow's game in our game day episode on Tuesday. Let's get you to the Kansas City Mavericks. Now, I talked about the Mavericks because they were just recently in Tulsa playing the Oilers, the ECHL affiliate of the Anaheim Ducks. And of course, the Kansas City Mavericks are our ECA affiliate. And, they were able to get 2 of 3 wins here in Tulsa. And then they went back to Kansas City, had some home cooking for the holiday. And, they took on their big rivals, Wichita. Okay. I want to talk about the Kansas rivalry. They took on Wichita and split that series with them. So we're seeing a little bit of highs and lows from the Kansas City Mavericks, but it's not time to panic. Our Kansas City Mavericks are currently 13-4-0, 26 points, third most victories in the ECHL overall. But what we heard from Tad O'Had and Locked On Kraken Insiders, you got access to the whole conversation before anyone else. But if you listen to Thursday, the Thanksgiving episode of Locked On Kraken, then you can hear what Tad said. But he talked about making sure that the Mavericks are playing their game. He talked about being effectively what we've been talking about, playing a consistent 60-minute game. He felt especially against the Oilers that they really dropped in a level in that third period. He also felt that maybe there was some complacency going into game 3. We also talked to Kyle Jackson, who of course was at Kraken development camp and training camp, at the beginning of the season for preseason. And he talked about, as many hockey players do, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. And guess who? Who really doesn't care that the Kansas City Mavericks at the time were at the top of their conference? The Oilers. They don't care. They didn't care about that. And so you see with the losses to the Oilers and the most recent loss to Wichita that the Kansas City Mavericks in 17 games, I mentioned the overall record, 13-4-0, a .765 win percentage, goals for 65, goals against 45. So pretty good plus 20 differential there. But they have dropped just a tick, and now the Idaho Steelheads are in first place in the in the Western Conference, they are 14-2-0. So we drop 2 games, and just like that, we lose that top spot. So here's what we need to know, though, about our Kansas City Mavericks. They are going to take on that very team, the Idaho Steelheads. They've got a 3-game slate against them coming up at home. So this is going to be a big series for them. Starts Wednesday, December 6th. So again, they have some time. Wednesday, December 6th, Friday, December 8th, and then Saturday, December 9th. Another thing that I want to mention before we close out today's episode of Locked on Kraken is that we did also see that our ECHL team, they made a trade. And so we know that they lost Tucker Robertson and Jack LaFontaine, goaltender Jack LaFontaine, to reassignments to Coachella Valley. I'm assuming, I haven't seen the news yet, but I'm assuming that Jack LaFontaine is going to return since Chris Jieger is coming back to Coachella Valley. That being said, and we'll talk about this a little bit more on Friday, but it might be an opportunity for Jack LaFontaine to actually stay with the Firebirds. Again, I haven't heard word yet, but when Dreeker's not in net, the Firebirds have struggled. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, back to the Mavericks. The Kansas City Mavericks acquire forward David Cotton from the Everblades in exchange for Jordan Sambrook. David is an exceptional talent, and we believe his skill set can make our club the very best. That's what head coach and GM Tad O'Had said. His hockey IQ, offensive ability, and power play will make a great addition. And so again, with Tucker perhaps with the Firebirds for a little bit longer, this seems pretty good. Cotton, over 100 AHL appearances across his 4-year professional career, played in 7 games for the Everblades this year. He was a 2015 6th-round draft pick of the Carolina Hurricanes and captain at Boston College in 2019-2020. He also played in the AHL for the Chicago Wolves and won the 2022 Calder Cup. So that's what we got working there. So we'll talk about the Firebirds a little bit more on Friday because they too have seen a little bit of inconsistency, maybe a little bit of that coming from net. And, this is a year where, if you remember, especially for you Locked on Kraken insiders, I had a conversation with Disco Dan Bilesma, and he said to me, you're talking about expectations, and there are a lot of expectations for the Seattle Kraken this year. There are certainly a lot of expectations for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. And if you listen to the show as an OGer or an everydayer, I had a lot of expectations on how this team was going to utilize preseason to really push themselves through the dog days of the season. I think some of the difficulties and struggles came a little bit sooner for Coachella Valley in particular than I expected. With the Seattle Kraken, I think, especially given our schedule, maybe not surprising, but I think what was surprising is just how inconsistent the team has been. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about the Firebirds, some players that I think could potentially be standouts to come up, and maybe we'll see them sooner than later, especially if the Seattle Kraken continue to struggle and, quite honestly, continue to have players in and out of the lineup with injury. I did a call for questions for the Locked on Kraken insiders. I'm going to hold some of those questions. So if you didn't get your questions in over the weekend, you still have a chance, and we will do that on Wednesday, because tomorrow's episode, we are going to talk, of course, about the game day against Chicago. But on Wednesday, we will do a mailbag. So if you're a Locked on Kraken insider, you know how to send those. I'll send you a reminder. But if you are an everyday or OG listener, make sure that you send them either via social media at Locked on Kraken, or you can send them to lockedonkraken@gmail.com. Open book. It's a mailbag. Any questions that you want. A lot of the questions so far, though, have been about our affiliates, and maybe if it's time to get some new young blood up to the Kraken and what I think might make the most sense. But if you have questions, make sure you tag at Locked On Kraken on social media, or you can email lockedonkraken@gmail.com. Finally, if you're watching on YouTube, hey YouTubers, you can reply in the comments. Question of the day, mailbag, wide open, ask me anything. I know some of you have also asked me about women's hockey, so that's fair game as well. But be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, our 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And until tomorrow, I say hold fast, stay true. Let's go Kraken, let's go Mavericks, and let's go Firebirds. Peace out, everybody.